coming to our first Keller Williams real estate seminar. I know we've torn you away from windsurfing, kiting, working, lounging, drinking, or whatever. So, first things first, I know quite a few people here, and if you don't know me, I'm probably better known for dogs, in that I put on the 2 Los Barriles dog shows, and I also founded Cortez Rescue. So thanks to Jen, who now runs it, thank goodness. But my normal day job, I'm actually in communications and marketing. I was board director of the biggest PR agency in the world called Edelman in London, and I also have worked in real estate. So I've worked in commercial real estate in the UK. I've worked on the east coast of the States, setting up residential real estate offices, and now I'm here. So I've got a lot of questions. Why are you doing the real estate work? Well, my partner and I, Dan, wherever he is, we have a lot of properties in the area, in Spa, in Buena Vista and Los Barriles, and we're very bullish about the market. We've been here a long time. Before that we were here on and off, and we've owned the land a long time, and really done nothing with anything until now, because we feel now is the time to really take advantage of what's happening in Baja, etc., in a responsible way, obviously. And just on that note, with all of your cups, etc., we will recycle them, so don't throw them away. So on to real estate. So today you're going to hear about 10 key things you should know about getting involved in real estate in Mexico. Can everybody see, by the way? Can you hear? Can you see okay? Yeah? Okay. So, number 10. For all of those people that don't recognise that, that's Wesley Snipes, who went to jail for tax evasion. So today we're going to be looking at capital gains tax. So this is a presentation designed for both sellers and buyers. We're going to be looking at the role of the attorney and the notaria, which you'll find out is very different to a notary in the US. Very, very different ball game. We're going to be looking at financing, and we have Global Mortgages here to talk to you. I think, Bob, is that you? If you can't read that, it said, who said being a mortgage broker was stressful? I'm 32 and I feel great. We're going to be talking about expectations as well, because there is an expectation that real estate here is going to be the same as it is in the States, and it's very different. And the inventory on the market, the number of days you can expect your property to be on the market are important factors that you have to think about when you're buying or selling here. We're going to talk about fees and expenses, what's involved, and we're going to talk about things like fideicomisos and escrituras. The difference can be confusing, and what we often find is that people are pretty much too scared to ask. So things like earnest money and escrows, etc. My beautiful assistant. Okay. So we're also going to talk about the closing process, and yeah, can you just keep on clicking it? Can I not do it? Oh, okay. Next. And also watch outs. There are some things to watch out for. For example, we'll talk about ejido land. You might have somebody saying to you, oh, I've got this great parcel of land to sell you, let's do it private together. And actually, what you might not know, it's ejido land which you actually can't buy. So we'll talk about that. Okay, firstly, we're going to look at house hunting, and the all-important thing, how do I select my realtor? So, okay. So basically what we're saying or advising when you go and choose a realtor, we know that there's lots of relationships there already, we know that people are referred on from other people, and here, living in such a small community, you actually tend to go with what your friends say. There's one thing I would say, and this isn't necessarily about realtors, but there's a big grapevine communication in Los Barriles. Everybody's got some piece of advice they want to give you, and if you ask somebody one question, you'll get 10 different answers. So our advice is talk to the professionals. So today you're going to have professionals in front of you. Javier, for example, who's a very, very highly skilled attorney in Cabo and San Jose. We've got the global mortgage guys who are here. Harry, who's been working in real estate for many years. So talk to the people that know what they're talking about, not your friends or somebody who still thinks it's the 1970s, because the laws change here very quickly, and it's important to know that you're getting the right advice. So back to the real estate agent. If you have 4 questions you want to ask them, this should probably be your 4. So firstly, are you licensed? Secondly, have you passed the connoisseur? Now the connoisseur is a test that is basically a measure of competency, and it's now a legal requirement if you want to get paid as a realtor. So there's a lot of realtors here I can see that I know have done it as well, so we're all in the same boat on that one, but there will be some who haven't, and it's really important that you ask them that question. Okay. Are you an AMPI member? AMPI is the equivalent of the National Association of Realtors in Mexico, and they have their code of ethics and other things that you have to sign up to, so it's a good thing to check on that as well. And lastly, it's not a requirement, but are you on the MLS? I mean, obviously that gives you exposure. There is a separate MLS down here, multiple listing service for, I know there's some British people here. It's basically almost like an aggregator where all the other realtors can see the properties, so it does help with marketing. So, you're not going to get any free wine or nibbles without me telling you a little bit about us. No such thing as a free lunch or a free snack. So, Keller Williams, basically, we, as you probably know, are pretty much one of the largest realtor groups in the States. And the advantage of Keller Williams is that there are 180,000 Keller Williams agents. And the way that well, there's a few here actually. The way that the system is set up is that so you are incentivized to work together. So, for example, we're working on a property at the moment called Casa Diamante, a beautiful house on the Las Brisas community on the hill up the road to nowhere. And a lot of the work has been done working with other offices in the States who know they have clients who want to buy in Baja. So that's what you get with Keller Williams. We've also got strong local networks beyond Baja into mainland Mexico, and we do a lot of focus on advertising and social media, which I'll show you now. So for all of you that haven't sold or bought in the last 10 years, you'll find it's a very different marketplace now. Technology is disrupting our lives, whatever sector you're in, but no more so than in the real estate sector. And you know, anything from the way photos and videos are produced now. Keep on scrolling. You know, you'll see drone footage, slideshows. You've got virtual tours, which I'll just show you a quick example of because they're amazing. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, everything. These all ladder up to what is now the way to sell real estate, and also internal intranets as well. So if we go on to the next slide, I'm just going to show you a quick example of really how selling houses is relying on, talk about technology. We've got the internet from the Palmers, so it might be a little slow with clicking on. So this is something that we do for although we're the luxury team, we do actually work with other levels of houses as well, but on something like Casa Diamante, which is clearly a luxury style house, we would produce a short video which is then viewed by our realtors elsewhere and also gives anybody else a chance to see exactly what it's like. It looks like we're having problems with the internet, so should we go on to the next slide? You can look at that. I can send people links if they want to see how that works. Now, one of the things we have is the Matterport system, which we basically film the house so that people can view the house virtually. Now, this is really important because you know what it's like having people coming around viewing your house all the time. It can be very disruptive. And what the virtual Matterport system does is basically allow people to take that tour of the house from their sofa or whatever. So you know when they do come that basically they're serious. So, I don't know whether we... Oh yeah, yeah, sorry. This is the technology issue here. So, do as I say, don't do as I do. Okay. I think it's crashed. Okay, so just actually while we're waiting to power that up on Google, it's worth mentioning that I'm here with my team from Cabo. Now, our office is actually in San Jose. You may have seen the Keller Williams office. So I'm here with Harry, our team leader, Scott, who is a realtor in Cabo and San Jose, as well as Heather, also a realtor in Cabo and San Jose, and also Claudia, who's our in-house closing transaction coordinator, which is a real luxury to have in itself, to have your own in-house dedicated person, and she's been doing it for many years. So she's bilingual and is a real stickler for detail, which is something that you need in this business. If we can get into the Matterport, that would be good, because it's worth showing you. Here we go. So basically what this is photos very cleverly stitched together to create a virtual tour, and it will actually run itself, so that you're basically sitting back on your sofa and letting it work for you. So this is Casa Diamante, Roxy and Greg's beautiful house in Las Brisas. Probably one of the best views on the East Cape, without a doubt. And you're not really going to get any unrivaled views like that unless somebody builds way up behind them, and that's not going to be for a very long time. So they can see the mountains, you've got the ocean view, so basically looking at sunrise and sunset, which is pretty unusual for houses here. Now obviously we don't spend too long on this, but if anybody's interested in learning more about the house, let me know. It's fantastic condition, brand new kitchen appliances, as you can see, and literally Roxy and Greg have done a beautiful job on renovating what really is referred to as a Frank Lloyd Wright style house. Okay, so that's the voiceover for the last one. There you go, technology. So I will now briefly pass you over to Harry, who's going to basically come and talk to us about the closing process. Just before he does that, I will introduce and tell you about the other speakers. So you'll be hearing from Harry, and Harry's done a really good diagram for us today, which will basically demystify all of the process you get involved with in real estate, whether you be a buyer or a seller. We're then going to hear from Javier, who's going to talk about some of the important factors around appraisals, capital gains tax, and also from a legal perspective, some of the watch-outs and the important things there. And then we're going to hear from Bob, who's going to talk to you about financing, because people say, oh, you can't get a mortgage, or the rates are too high, etc., etc. Well, he's got an update on that. And just before I hand over to Harry, we have a luxury magazine which is at the back of the room. That's actually featuring Casa Diamante, so if you would like to talk about that or have a look at it, yeah, let us know. There you can see it's at the top there. Great, okay, without further ado, I think you've fed up with my accent and me droning on, and I'll pass you over to Harry.
Yeah, big round of applause for Emma. She's doing a fantastic job. That's awesome. And thank you very much for showing up today. Really appreciate it. It just shows how much interest there is in finding out exactly what the processes are for real estate. One of the important things about the publication that Emma just showed you was that this is distributed through the luxury division of Keller Williams Luxury International. Now, that particular division sells $71 million worth of real estate a day. 71 million a day. And What we're trying to do is up the game and bring that level of competency down here to the Baja. And the way that we do it is explaining the way that the process actually takes place. And what we have here is a flow chart. I hope that everybody can see it. If you'd like a copy of it, please contact any one of us on the luxury team, and we're more than happy to provide it. Basically, it starts out blank, and then we go from there. No, we've kind of broken it down a little bit so it's easier to see. And it starts out, once you locate your luxury home or property and land, condo, whatever it is, you can estimate that it's going to take 60 to 90 days to close the deal, to make it happen. And then, once you find it, what we're going to do is we're going to write up an offer, and that's in the green box over on the right. And so there's going to be a purchase agreement is put together. Typically, there's earnest money that's involved. Pretty much everybody in here, I'm sure, has purchased a piece of property up in the States, and you know that there's earnest money and a purchase agreement that goes together. And down here, we look for about 10%. It's usually done by wire transfer only, because people are a little sketchy about checks down here. And they get a couple of copies of ID, which is a passport, driver's license, or some form of ID that is government certified. And then you can estimate that closing costs are going to be 3 to 15%, depending on the size of the purchase. The larger the transaction, actually the lower the closing costs are. So if you're buying a $25,000 lot and you're using financing to get it, you could have a fairly expensive closing costs when you go to the closing table. So you just want to be aware of that when you're doing it. Now, if you're buying new construction, typically they have it set so that you come up with the money in a series of payments. If it's pre-construction, you'll put down a deposit of maybe 30% to get it, and you'll put up another percentage at substantial completion, which means it's got the roof on. Okay, it's not glassed in or anything like that, but it's that substantial completion is when it's got the lid on it. And then the last one, of course, the 40% typically is at closing. When you go to the closing table, you come up with the last payment. And then fideicomiso fees typically average about $440 to $770 a year. Once the offer is made, what you do is you do a home inspection. And you make the presentation to the seller, and you go to get an accepted offer. And either the offer is going to be accepted, or there could be some additional negotiation. Maybe they don't want to do the price. Maybe some of the things that you think that are included in the sale actually aren't, because they're family heirlooms or art or something that people really want to keep. So it's always good to do a list of exceptions if you're planning on listing your home. So if you're going to have things that are not included in the sale, make sure that that's written up front. A lot of people will do photo inventories as well. So they'll go through and they'll actually take a picture of what is either included or not included in the sale. So you can say, okay, this doesn't go. This is not happening. And you negotiate that, but the key thing is to get to yes. Okay? Once you get to yes, then you end up in the blue box over here, which is we always recommend getting a professional home inspection done. Because let's face it, none of us are engineers. There might be engineers in here, but you know, a lot of us aren't. We don't know whether or not there's any hidden defects in the home. And you can hire somebody that'll actually look for that and test the electrical and make sure that the air conditioner works. And that you know, the things that are important to you, the appliances or whatever is supposed to convey, are in good working order. Most offers are as is. So once it's you make the offer, it's kind of caveat emptor. So you want to make sure that you have the option to do a home inspection and have a professional go through and take a look at what it is that you're buying so that you don't have any unpleasant surprises. And once you do that, you can actually come back and either just move forward, or if it's no, you know, you found some major defect or problem with the property that isn't worth buying it at the price that you offer, then you can negotiate repairs and, you know, say, hey, that clunking noise that the AC is making, we need to have that fixed because it's supposed to work the way that it's supposed to work. And the key thing is to get to yes. And once you get to yes, then you go through the transaction process. We're lucky enough as a lovely team here. We've got Claudia Gonzales as our transaction coordinator, and she is a real stickler for the details, making sure that everything is the way that it's supposed to be, all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. So it's important to make sure that you're dealing with people who have support people that are going to be able to make sure that the transaction goes smoothly and that there's no surprises. And basically what happens is once the offer has been accepted, is complete, the home inspection is done, and everything has been blessed off, then the closing transaction coordinator is assigned and a closing attorney is assigned. Now, we're very blessed this evening to have Javier Mazoy here, who is an expert. I mean, we're really proud to have him as one of our professional partners here, and we'll be able to explain a little bit about the magic that he works. But that gets done, and then Claudia will verify the passport, driver's license, proof of address, verify that the actual earnest money transfers have taken place by wire transfer, and then go through and get the instructions on vesting title, who's going to be the actual owner, if it's a fideicomiso, who's the beneficiary that it's going to go to in case of something happening. Because I don't know if you know this or not, but in a fideicomiso there is actually a section that allows you to determine who the beneficiary is. So if you hit cow on the highway coming home, they're not going to have to say, well, what do we do with this? Where does this property go? It's defined, and it's legally binding. So that person will inherit that property straight away. Just a side note, I always recommend getting a will done here locally, because if that does happen and the house conveys, you also want a Mexican will so that it determines where all of the other assets go. What about the vehicles, the boats, the fishing gear, everything else? That isn't actually defined in your fideicomiso, so it's good to have supplemental information available to where, how that's supposed to be distributed, what your will is, what you want done. Then the closing attorney will prepare the power of attorney, get a closing cost estimate pulled together, and get bank approval for creation of the trust and extinguishing of the trust, because you're going to have to extinguish the existing trust if it is not held in an escritura, and an escritura is a fee simple form of title. And typically it can be as little as 3 weeks if it is held in escritura, because that's basically one Mexican transferring it to another Mexican, or Mexican corporation transferring it to a Mexican corporation. It just makes it simple because you don't have to go through that extra step of getting the fideicomiso. A fideicomiso? Well, it's a bank trust, is what a fideicomiso is. And that's one of the ways that you can hold property down here. Article 27 of the Mexican Constitution prohibits ex-terranos, which is basically everybody in this room, from owning property within 100 kilometers of the borders and 50 kilometers of the coastline. So if you were in Mexico City, you could buy a condo, fee simple, get an escritura, even though you're a gringo, and you wouldn't have to worry about it because, you're not anywhere near the coastline. Lake Chapala, that's another area that's really heavily vested with Americans and Canadians and gringos, because, you don't have to, have a fideicomiso there. But unfortunately, Baja, there's only one little tiny strip in the very center of Baja California that you'd be able to do that. And you have to have one of these trusts that's made up. And that's done through a bank. The bank manages the trust for you, and that's why you would have to pay the bank fees, on an annual basis. But you actually have control to use this fideicomiso or use that property in any way that you want. You can build on it, you can add to it, you can knock it down, you can transfer it, you can do whatever you want, and they're going to do that for you. But owning it in that escritura, you're going to have to become a Mexican citizen to be able to do it that way. we're going to do a question and answer session here at the end. And then the closing attorney will work with the notario. You get to pick the notario that you actually get to work with. It's always good to pick a closing attorney who has established relations with a notario so that they work well together. And what they're going to do is they're going to create all of the legal documents necessary to transfer clear title or the fideicomiso to the buyers. And then about 14 days before closing, the wire transfer takes place for the final funds to be able to procure or buy the property. And in that time, what you can do is you can order homeowners insurance or order title insurance, much like you would have in the United States. It's not uncommon down here, although a lot of people don't do it because the Mexican government won't transfer title if there's any clouds or any issues with the title. Okay? And then what happens, you'll get that magic call. The notario will say, hey, we're going to be able to close. We want you to be here on such and such a date. And you end up at the notario's office. You sign all of the documents. And that is the day that you actually get the keys and any of the associated things that come with it. If you're in an HOA, they'll transfer all of the HOA documentation. The CC&Rs will be transferred over, and any of the manuals will be transferred, and then the chattel, which is basically anything that you say wants to convey. So if you buy a house and they say, hey, we're going to throw in the car or something like that, basically chattel is anything that is not a building, not part of that particular structure. Okay? And then what happens is it's all sent over to Mexico City, where it is formally recorded in the Federal Register, and they certify all the copies of the Fideicomiso Trust, and those are given back in about 45 or 60 days. What's important to remember is once you have actually gone to the closing table, is to ask for a letter of conveyance, because the closing attorney and the notario will prepare a letter, and it will say that, hey, this person has closed on this particular property, and that allows you to go transfer all the utilities and everything else that you need. Because sometimes people will say, oh, well, you just have to leave it in their name for a while until it actually transfers. That's not the case. So it's important to do that and make sure that the process is followed so that you end up with a safe and secure transaction. Okay? And like I said, if you'd like a copy of this flow chart, please contact any one of us or grab one of the cards off the back table and just drop us a note, and we're more than happy to send that to you so that you have a hard copy of that to look at. Okay? Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Okay, so Javier is now going to come up and talk to us. As I said, he is a very well-known attorney in Cabo and San Jose, operating across the whole of Baja. He mainly focuses on luxury properties because he can choose what he wants to do. But he's going to give us more of an interactive presentation. So I'll hand over to Javier.
Thank you very much. I thought this was more for realtors rather than buyers and sellers or people here. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. I did my law degree in Mexico City, and I went to do an MBA in London School of Economics. And then I went to work in the US for a couple of years. And suddenly, everyone was asking me, like, I have clients from Cabo, this is 25 years ago, and say, why do they need a lawyer in Denver if there are not attorneys in Cabo? I decided to come to this land, which is my place. This is where my 3 kids were born. And at the beginning, it was the Old West. I remember one client came to me and said, I bought this land for $200,000. And I said, where's your title? He didn't show me a napkin, but it was almost like a napkin. And the contract says 200,000 pesos. I said, like, this is not real. It's the old West. So I was the first one that went to Stewart Title in Texas, and I brought them in, and I said, like, we need title insurance and we need escrow. Because what was happening, they were giving the money to the realtors, and there are a couple of cases that you may know, but they embellished the money and they just run away. And it was really, really tough at the beginning. A lot of people told me, what are you doing here? You're hurting all of us. And I said, I need to do what I need to do. I'm not going to get into that. I'm a federal notary, and I'm an alternative state notary, but that's irrelevant. But what I learned today is that I need to talk to you a little bit more about how your taxes, your capital gains, and how it is. I wanted to have this, but I think right now I don't need it. Basically, they're going to give you some presentations I sent about closing process in Mexico and the 10 best questions or questions everyone has. The Fideicomiso was created in 1972. This place became a state in 1974. It was a territory. The reason they made it was because at that time it was forbidden for any foreigner to own a piece of land within the 100 kilometers and the 50 kilometers. So what was happening? They were doing leasing agreements. They were putting under someone else's name that then after the end, they will say, well, it's my land, not yours. And they decided that trust was the best way to do it. I don't think it was the best way to do it, but it was the only way to do it. So they created the trust. At the beginning for 30 years, not renewable. Then they did 30 years renewable. Now it's 50 years renewable. So none of us will exist after their renewal. But there are important things to know about this, because there are three different things that you have. First of all, you buy a lot, just a lot, and then you build something, or you don't build it, and just a lot. Second, you bought a house already with a lot. And third one, you build a house with a lot, or you build something in that lot and then you improve it. How does it work, the capital gains in Mexico? To start with, we don't have capital gains as you have it in the States or in Canada. We have income tax, and everything comes into income tax. We understand the capital gains concept, but it's not like in the US, for example, and I don't know about Canada, but in the US, for example, you pay 20% of capital gains, and income tax, it depends on your income. While in Mexico, it's the same thing. So we have a treaty to avoid double taxation, which means whatever tax you pay here, it would be a tax credit dollar to dollar in the US. What does it mean? If in Mexico you pay $200,000 on the capital gains, and in the US you need to pay 180, they don't return you anything. But if you need to pay 220, you pay the difference. Basically, that's what it means. So how do we establish the basis, which is the most important part, and it comes to the Old West? People, contractors, and everyone say, forget about it. I give you a construction license for the minimum I can, so you save 1%, because that's a cost. And he gets the money without giving invoices. So there are three ways to to establish your basis. And this applies to everyone. First of all, invoices, which are called facturas. Second, the notice is not a manifestation, notice of completion, which is before the Public Works Office that normally matches the construction permit. And they say, if you don't have any of those, you can do an appraisal. The appraisal, forget about the land, is just for the construction, because the land is what you pay for that, and that's in the deed. The appraisal will it's a referred appraisal. What does that mean? If you build in 2010, we do an appraisal as of today, and then we say how much it will have cost in 2010. There are some tricks there that I will explain you later, but those are the three ways to prove your cost. Then I'm going to come to the exchange rate factor, which is horrible for you, because if you buy something in $100,000, let's say, and I'm going to put it as an example, 3 years ago, and the exchange rate was 15 to 1. For Mexican purposes, you bought it 100,000, it's 1.5 million pesos. Let's say you sell it right now for the same, let's forget about commissions and realtors and everything. If you sell it for the same $100,000 today, and the exchange rate is 20, in dollars, you're even. In pesos, you're selling for 2 million, and you bought it for 1.5, you need to pay tax. So that's the part that sometimes they never explain, they never do. However, there's an inflationary factor there. The problem is when a devaluation comes very easy, like in 2 or 3 years, it's really difficult for inflation to catch up. So normally, for example, if someone bought a lot in 2005, let's put it that way, right now the inflationary factor is 110, which means whatever he bought in pesos is plus 110, because he has an inflationary factor or inflationary credit. So it has to be very specifically, but the biggest problem, and I'm going to say, I don't think there's any contractor here, but what happens? They don't want to get the money, so that they give an invoice and they tell you, let's get the closest or the minimum construction license, because you're going to pay 1%, and I'm going to save you that, but they don't tell you you're going to end up paying a 35% after that on capital gains. Why do you pay 35%? We don't pay 35%. That's our maximum rate, because we don't have capital gains and income. Everything is income. Because you do not do annual returns. Therefore, you pay 35% of whatever income is. It's a total income. And that is much more than what you pay in the US or in Canada. So that's one of the biggest problems we have. And people that are buying need to be aware it's part, and the Canadians may know it a little bit better, because when you're talking about US dollars, everything is US dollars, and you live in the US, but Canadians also have this exchange rate factor, or this exchange thing. So what can you do when you don't have facturas, when you don't have, and I'm talking about something constructed or an improvement? When you don't have facturas, you don't have notice of completion, you don't have anything, you can do an appraisal. The only problem with the appraisal is that only whatever the appraisal says, 80% counts on that. So if I say the appraisal was $1 million, it's only 800,000. However, there's a loophole in the law, because they never say, which I think it should be, the cost. They just say an appraisal. What I'm trying to say is I can appraise something on the commercial market, not on the cost, because there are three ways to appraise. Direct cost, rental capitalization, and then commercial value. It never tells you which of them you use. So I can use the commercial one and refer to the place to put it, not the cost, which should be what it would be. But what I'm trying to say here is that a lot of you have bought properties where some of the sellers transfer the price not in what you paid, a little bit less because they were saving capital gains. Right now, it's completely different because the new money laundering law requires you to say from what account to what account and the complete price. And us as a notary cannot say anything different. We don't say the accounts in the deed, we just put the 4 last numbers, but we need to have the receipts from escrow that the money was transferred from here to there. And we need to report it. So things are changing. And the other thing that happened, many people used to buy LLCs, and they say, well, I buy LLC, I sell my LLC. Never do it. Why? If I bought in 2005, I'm going too far, 2005, and I bought for $100,000 in my LLC, and right now you're buying for $200,000, you're not buying the property, you're buying the shares or the membership. You're inheriting the price he paid for that property. But secondly, which is more important, Mexican law states, and the treaty, if you buy shares or membership from a company that owns more than 50% of its total assets in Mexico property, which is mostly all the case, they create an LLC specifically for that, then the buyer needs to withhold 25% of the price and pay to the Mexican government. So the buyer is the one is responsible for that, because the source of the income comes from the real estate, not from the shares. And imagine no one knows, because it's very difficult for the Mexican one. Right now it's a little bit easier because the banks request everything, but imagine you want to sell tomorrow and you pay already 200, the basis is 100, and you don't find a buyer that wants to buy your company. And you say, I paid 200. No, your basis is 100,000. Because that's what the company paid for. So this place is changing, Mexico is changing, and I think that whenever there are ways to walk around it, and I'm saying to do tricky things. There are ways to try to work it out, because a lot of you, and I'm sure, because here this place is a little bit like Cabo 10 years ago, or 15 years ago. And people here is like more like, relax, don't worry, nothing happens. But suddenly, you won't sell a lot, you won't sell your house, and you don't have the real basis. And how do we do it? You can Actually, before the appraisal, you can even go to the public works office and say, you know, my construction license was getting for 100, I really spent 300. You pay the difference of 1% plus a penalty, and they change it, and that's your new basis. But there are many ways to try to do this around. When they say manifestation, everyone understands that, but the manifestation is what you say at the property taxes office. Really what you need is the equivalent in the US of a notice of occupancy. That is called aviso de terminación de obra. So you need to think about these things. The second thing, it's till 2013, whatever you did states as a purchase price, that's a purchase price. After that, the notary that closes has to issue an invoice for the price. Because if not, whatever it says there, it's irrelevant if you don't have a factura. So you need to be very careful about that part. It's called CFDI, which is a certificate, internet, whatever. And you need to be certain about it. But basically, you need to, well, first, you need to see, when they ever say, like, do a capital gain study, they said, please send me the information about your purchase price and then your construction, and if you do any improvements, it's very important, this part. I need invoices. Maintenance, for example, is non-deductible because maintenance is a way to keep your property normal. But if you do improvements, you need to have invoices. And I'm going to tell you, if you do invoices, if you do a change in your property internally, you don't need a construction permit. You need invoices because you don't need a construction permit because you're not increasing the size or modifying it. You're just basically changing the floors, changing the kitchen. You need invoices. And why anyone wants to get invoices? Because that way they don't pay taxes. They receive the cash. And in the US, which is something that I love, the check you give, it's enough to prove what you pay. In Mexico, it's not that way. Because everyone cheats. Honestly, that's the reason. But we need to change. Because if we want to become a different country, we need to change on that. And so therefore, those are the things that we need to be aware of. Here in this area, still is not like the Old West, but like a little Old West. And well, I don't know if you want any more information, and I'm open for questions and answers.
The same thing as the factura?
No, a receipt is not the same as a factura.
But when you're working on your home, does a receipt work, or do you have to have factura?
You have to have factura. The factura has a tax ID number and like a special seal. Right now, all of them are electronic. I'm going to tell you, Mexico has one of the best systems in the world in terms of electronic invoicing. Doesn't mean that everyone invoices, but so a receipt. For example, you go with your gardener, and your gardener changes the grass, and he just gives you a receipt. I received $1,000. Nope, doesn't work. You need to have a factura, an invoice.
I have a question about the fideicomiso.
Mm-hmm.
It's a trust, and so the owner of the property is the beneficiary of that trust. If the owner of the property wants to make improvements, does there have to be any notification to the trust holder?
No. Some trustees ask about it, but it's irrelevant for tax purposes. What is important, and you say, it's If you have already a trust, you don't really need to create a new trust. You can assign the rights over the trust. Because the trust is not for the person, it's for the property. But in your question, you don't need to notify the trustee. It's basically, what happens here is, it was a very strange figure, what they made, but the beneficiary is the owner of all rights and the usage and the disposal of the property. So as long as it's done under the beneficiary name, it's perfectly well. I'm going to talk another thing that say, well, if I live in my home and you're permanent residents, can I exempt the capital gains? Yes. You need to have a tax ID number, and the maximum is around $250,000, which means, that doesn't mean if you sell a property for $1 million, you're exempted for the first 250. Is the maximum. What happened here? Before it used to be whatever. At the beginning was, if I buy another house, then it's exempt. Then whatever, 5 years. Then what the government said, 97% of the people in Mexico has houses less than $250,000. So they say, I cap it there. But if you are a permanent resident and you have a tax ID, you have the right to exempt for the first $250,000 on capital gains.
Could you explain again the difference between an appraisal and a manifestation?
Okay. First thing, you need to have facturas. If you don't have them, then you go for, it's not a manifestation, it's what I said, the notice of completion. Because the manifestation is before the property taxes office. The notice of completion is before the public works office, that is the one that granted the construction permit. So if that notice states that you spent 2 million pesos, that's what it is. If you don't have any of them, you can always do an appraisal, but not on land, just on construction. Because the price of the land is whatever you pay for it in your deed. It's just for the improvements or the constructions. Did I explain myself?
Mm-hmm. So can you up the manifestation after you have, like on an already built house? Do you need to change that manifestation?
You can change it, and you need to pay the difference of the construction permit plus a penalty because you didn't do it on the right time. But it's 1% plus 1%, which is much, much better than 35%.
Once the manifestation's done, it's done.
No, you can still change it. You can still change it legally as long as you prove. They're going to ask you for your plans, they're going to ask you for all the things and say, I manifested this, which was not really what it was. I manifested this. So you can still do it without any, okay, I'm going to tell you, there are a lot of people that tells you, pay me X amount and I will change your manifestation. That's bribing. It's not doing it correctly. But you can change it correctly. And if not, you go to the appraisal.
Have you got access to the government office for the appraisals?
The appraisal, and I'm going to tell you, this is interesting what you're saying. The acquisition tax, when you buy, is at 2%, which is a municipal tax. The capital gains is a federal tax. So the city has nothing to do with that, because it's a federal tax. And the appraisal, the type of appraisal I'm telling you about, is not a city, the normal city appraisal. It's by one that is a federal appraiser. Because capital gains is a federal tax, not a local tax.
When you go to the bank that's on your fideicomiso with you every year and pay them their $500, what do you get for that from the bank?
Nothing, but I'm gonna tell you something. I agree with you, but I always said it's a gift from the government to them. But I'm gonna tell you something. If I will be a CEO of a bank, I will pull out of the fiduciary business, and I'm gonna tell you why. With the new money laundering law, the amount of work they need to do, for $500, I will never do it. So what happens is, it's not what they're doing for you. It's what they need to do internally. I was talking to someone here, and I said, there are 3 or 4 banks right now. For example, HSBC is pulling out. Scotiabank is pulling out. BBVA is pulling out. There are some small banks, which is irrelevant for you, because if they go to bankruptcy, nothing happens, because it's a bank trust, and it's not part of their assets. But there are small banks that say, I want this business. Because the cost for HSBC is more than $500 per year. What they do for you? Nothing. But they need to do a lot on reporting. A lot.
So if you have HSBC, you have...
I will change it.
You have forever.
No, I already talked. Normally with my clients,
Now the FIDO business, what do you do?
no, they return their office, they reopen it, they have a new office there in Cabo San Lucas. But what I say to my clients, if they have HSBC, if you're intending to sell, change now. Because if not, your closing is going to take 6 to 7 months.
How difficult is it to change the cost-wise?
The cost is around $3,000, more or less, to change from one trustee to the other. But you can do it right now. The timings have been going, like the last time I closed something with HSBC was 3 months and a half. But before that, I took a year. So, because HSBC didn't have an office anymore. They closed their office. So normally I say, if you really want to sell, change it right now. Because if not, you're going to pay it when you sell. But it's different to pay when you have money than right now putting the money. I think I'm over, or do I have more time?
Who's the recommended trustee? Sorry, go ahead. Who's the recommended trustee then?
There are 3 that are really good. Phelps Bank is a small bank owned by the Jewish community in Mexico City. They're really good. Then there's another one, Intercam, which I think they have an office here. And the other one is Banco del Bajío. They are the best to work with.
Banorte is not included?
Banorte, yes. Banorte, the thing is that they have a problem with the merge with Interacciones.
Yeah.
Interacciones and Banorte merged, and for a while they were not working right, but now they're good. Yeah.
Okay.
You haven't talked at all about corporations. We bought our house, our property in 2001, and we were told to do a corporation. So we did a corporation.
A U.S. Or a Mexican?
Mexican. So we have a tax ID number like we were talking about. But part of it, we have a casino on one piece of property and a house on another, want to sell one. But if they're both in a corporation.
You can sell them. The problem is, why did you do a corporation? It was, yes, that's typical, let's say, avoid the trust, do a corporation.
They said it was easier to sell and easier to buy.
Yes and no. You need to pay accountancy every month, and you need to do. Yes, and how big is your property?
It's a third of an acre, 2/3 of an acre.
So I think it was a bad advice.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's better to switch now.
No, because it's going to cost you transfer tax and everything. Don't do it. Just keep it. It's going to cost you less than moving it.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. As you can tell, he's incredibly experienced, and we're very lucky to have him here today. Carved out a couple of hours for us, which is great. So, Now we're going to pass over to Bob Phelps, who's CEO of Global Mortgages.
So I learned a couple of things tonight. Number one, I was sitting in the back corner over there, and I started talking to a couple of gentlemen back there, and they both turned around and looked at me at the same time, and they said, what do you have to do with this? And I stood up and I said, I'll tell you in just a minute. So I don't know if they were, and gentlemen, I'm going to talk about you because I was watching you really closely. So when something was said that I would see, now the gentleman on the end, what's your name? Yeah. Scott. And then this young lady right here, what's your name?
Oh.
No, you're not a young lady. So, right, yeah, you. Yeah, so something was said, and then they would lean forward and look at each other. And I don't know if that was a good look or if it was, are you married?
Yeah.
It was a divorce look, so it wasn't a good look. So I could tell just by looking at him. So, look, my name's Robert Phelps. I go by Bob. I've been in the real estate industry for 37 years. So I do take offense with when they showed the picture up there that said that you age very quickly. I've been in this industry again for 37 years, and I'm only 22 years old. And so I do take offense to that, but this is a great industry. I've worked all over the world in real estate finance and in finance in general. I love finance. Some people find it boring. I actually adore it. As I came to Mexico, one of the first things that I tried to do was to learn everything I could about compliance, about real estate, about the closing process. Everything that I could learn about, I tried to learn about. In 3 years, I feel like I've almost been reborn again in terms of what the real estate industry is like. It's very exciting in Mexico. What's more exciting than just the industry as a whole, to see where the industry is going. I've spent a number of years working for the United States government with the Office of CFPB, which is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And one of my jobs was to go around the country in the United States and to kind of look and see where the market's going. And my job was to look at 3 to 5 years out. Anything past that was a guess. But as you look 3 to 5 years out in Mexico and where we're at today, I see great things. I remember a little place called Irvine, California, right across the border, just north of San Diego. And it was all orange trees, and there was a raceway there. And as a kid, I would go to that raceway, and I just couldn't believe that there was nothing around there. It was all orange groves, and it smelled great. So there's nothing like the smell of racing fuel and oranges. It was really exciting. But now you go to Irvine, and it's probably one of the most booming metropolises in all of Southern California. It's been voted one of the fastest growing cities, but that's what I see down here in Mexico. I drive up and down the corridor, I come to Las Barriles, and I see things that, if people that have been here for so many years, you look back, and if you just take notice, just stop for a minute and think what it was like 10 years ago, or 12 years ago, or 15 years ago. And then think what it was like 3 years ago, and the new buildings that have come up. That's kind of where we're at today. So before I get into this, one thing that I want to do is I want to tell you that, yes, you can get a mortgage in Mexico. One of the things that I hear all the time is, well, there's just no money in Mexico to buy homes. We have to pay cash. The most stark reality that I've faced in Mexico is that, yes, people are paying cash, but a lot of people aren't paying cash just by writing a check and saying, hey, I've got this extra money laying around. Let's pay $500,000, $700,000, $1 million for a piece of property. They'll go to the United States, they'll take a home equity line of credit out on their current home. They'll take money out of their 401k, their IRAs, any of their retirement vehicles. And then when you stop and think about it and you do a return on investment, you find out very quickly that the penalties that you pay, depending on your age, the penalties and the taxes that you pay are sometimes higher than the interest that you would pay in Mexico. Anybody have an idea what the interest rate in Mexico is for a mortgage loan? Or nobody has an idea?
14.
What is it?
14 to 18.
14 to 18? Yeah, the highest I've seen it is 23, but we won't talk about that one. But I think it was brought up before that that's the dishonesty in all of this. That's the line your pocket type situations, and that's not what the industry should be. That's not what the financial industry should be. That's not what the housing market should be. That's not what the real estate industry should be. Once you start getting into that realm, then people stop buying homes. People stop saying, well, I have a dream to do X, Y, and Z, and then they just stop doing it. Because you know that paying all that money for interest every year is pretty expensive. Then on top of that, to buy a home, is it expensive to buy a home in Mexico the first year? Anybody know? You remember what it was like? Who's bought a home in Mexico? Do you remember what it was like to buy a home? How long ago did you buy your home?
25 years.
You ruined my whole talk. Jeez, that's terrible. No, so back then it was probably pretty good. Anybody recently? 5 years? 5 years? What was it like to write that check for the closing cost and all the taxes? Yeah, it was pretty bad, right? Yeah.
But we knew about it.
What's that?
We were warned about it.
That's right. Well, you'd be surprised how many people aren't warned about it. And they come in and they say, oh, we're being ripped off, we're being this, we're being that. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's not a rip-off, that in fact, it's actually cheaper than buying a home in the U.S. or buying a home in Canada in the long run. Okay? We're going to talk about that. First thing, our mission statement is to provide the most trustworthy, customer-centric, cross-border financing to foreigners purchasing real estate in Mexico. Now, these are all just words up here, right? It's easy to put something and put a mission statement up, but living it is another thing. We do live this. This is most important because that's how Mexico is going to grow. Our belief is that receiving a mortgage in Mexico should provide complete transparency. That means that you open everything up. You don't hide anything. You're not afraid to say, look, you know what? It costs this much money. And when it costs this much money, however, let me show you how you're going to save that money in the long run. Okay? But complete transparency, fast and easy loan completion, and a complete understanding both before, during, and after the financing or the loan process. That's the most important thing. Money is out there to be had. We are a little bit different at Global Mortgage. We are not a hard money lender. We are actually the only licensed cross-border real estate investment firm in all of Mexico. That's not just in Cabo or Los Barriles, it's everywhere in Mexico. We are licensed as a SAFON, and so, in other words, tomorrow we could open up as a bank. And I can tell you we get audited like we are a bank. We've had 9 audits since the 1st of January. Why do they audit us so much? To make sure that everything that is being done is done the right way. So what does that mean for a U.S. person like myself? It means that we come over here to Mexico, we have 2 goals in mind. Number 1 is to be obedient to every law, every compliance statute that has been listed by the Mexican government. And believe me, there are a lot. I thought when I worked for the United States government, writing laws like the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act for privacy or the Dodd-Frank Act, and to make people adhere to these, companies adhere to these, I thought that was tough. And then I came to Mexico and I found out that compliance is extremely, extremely tough, and you have to do all the right things. Because in Mexico, in the United States, you do something wrong and they do an audit, they slap you on the hand and they say, if you don't straighten up your act, we're going to come back in 5 years and do this again. In Mexico, they come in, they slap you on the hand and say, get out of the office, and then you put this big swatch of yellow tape right on your door. And they basically close you down until you can prove that you're going to adhere to those practices. So is that good or bad? I think it's absolutely good because it makes people do things the right way and at the right times. Okay? It's kind of hard to see that, but our loan program guidelines are this. We came out with a loan program. We've only got 2 loan programs in all of Mexico. The reason we only have 2 loan programs is because we wanted to simplify it. We can go through, and the last company I worked at, I was president and CEO of a company called TD out of, does that mean I'm done? So there's a company out of California, and it was called TD, and we were throughout the entire United States. And I'll tell you, we had 567 different loan programs that you could choose from. It was mind-boggling to do that. So we've set it up to where you can do a loan for $100,000 all the way up to $2,500,000. If it's anything over that, then we make exceptions. The nice thing is the exceptions are made right here. We don't have to go places. We don't have to take a lot of time to make exceptions. Second thing is the interest rates. 14 to 18 was set over here. Our interest rates are 7 to 10%, and that's based. It's risk based. And so when we do a loan, when we finance a property here in Mexico, we look at the same thing that you would look at as you're in the United States or Canada. We look at the creditworthiness of an individual, but the most important thing that we look at is we look at your ability to repay. If I've got somebody, we look at debt to income ratio. That means how much money do you make and how much money do you spend, in short. So if you look at how much money you spend, we want to keep a debt to income ratio around 38%. That gives you the ability, that helps us to understand that that's in that sweet spot that everybody repays. There's no foreclosures, there's no defaults, there's very few late payments, things like that. But if you're above that, like a person came to me the other day and his debt to income ratio, true story, 179%. Okay? Anybody see a problem with that? So I told him that, and he goes, "Oh, come on, please." And I said, "There's no come on, please about it." I said, "You can't even live." Now, there may be extenuating factors surrounding that. Well, he happened to have a $100,000, $120,000 payment that he was getting for disability. And then he had some other payments that brought his debt to income ratio down to a whopping 89%. And so he says, "See, I'm all set to go." And I said, "Well, unfortunately, it takes 30% just to live. And when we figure out a debt-to-income ratio, we don't take into account that you have to pay utilities, you have to eat, you have activities you're going to perform, and things like that." So we look at that very closely. All of our loans are 15-year fixed, and they're amortized over 15 years. There's no balloon payments. There's no, on that loan, there's no prepayment penalty. So people say, "Well, God, why don't you do a 3 or a 5 or a 7 or a 10-year loan or a bridge loan?" The reason we don't do that is because for the simple fact that there's no prepayment penalty. So why should I charge you more interest to do a short-term loan when you could take the 15-year loan out? And if you want to pay it, we have one guy right now that's paying off his loan. He's had the loan for 1 month. 1 month, and he's paying it off. I don't like him, but that's okay. That's okay. But he's paying off in 1 month. He called up, he says, "How much to pay it off?" I told him, no admin fee, no nothing. He's mailing a check to pay off his loan. Okay? So there are no factors in there, that admin fees and all that kind of stuff that you're looking at. So we do up to 60% loan to value. Again, no prepayment penalties. And here's the real clincher, is we also do a cash out refi. So your home that you've had for 25 years, if it's worth $500,000 and you want to borrow 50% on that home, you can do that. Okay? Talk to me after. And so, but, so the big thing is now we've got 2 avenues in Mexico. We've got a lot of people that will look at the homes that they've had for 6, 8, 10, 12 years, and they'll say, "Look, I think I want to buy a bigger home. I want to do whatever." There's a number of reasons that people have talked to us about. So they do that. They come to us. They borrow that money, they go buy the new home, and then they turn around and sell their other home. And, it's just a kind of this eternal round, but now they have the money to do that because they've been able to utilize what they built up over so many years. Now, is that for everybody? Look, I'm not the salesperson. Nobody's ever going to claim that I'm a salesperson because I tell it like it is. There's a lot of people I'll come to and say, "You want to do a cash out refi? Let's talk." We'll sit down, we'll do a return on investment for them. We'll put all the numbers together, and I'll look them right in the eye and say, "You shouldn't touch this. You shouldn't do this. You're getting close to your retirement years, or you're in your retirement years. Why do you want to add a payment on top of what you're doing already?" And most people say, "Well, because I can. I have the money." And I said, "But just because you have it, does that mean you want to spend it on something like this?" And so I'm very, very effective at saying no. And then people will look at me and say, "I want to do it anyway." And I'm not going to stop somebody from doing it, but I'm going to look at everybody, and I don't care if they're buying a brand new home for the first time or if they're doing a refi. We're going to do that same thing, and we're going to help them out regardless. Okay? Again, it's risk-based qualifications, 7 to 10%. We look at a number of items. Number one, we look at your FICO score. That's your credit worthiness score. In the U.S., they call it FICO. Canada, it's different. And do you know that there's a credit score here in Mexico for you folks that are residents of Mexico? Did you know that? You have a credit score in here in Mexico. Chances are most of you are not, it won't come up for you, because attached with the credit score and the credit worthiness here in Mexico, you also have something that they call the blacklist. If you're on the blacklist, I would tell you that maybe a trip back to the States or Canada is a good thing. Okay? The blacklist you don't want to be on. Okay? That's tied very closely with wrongdoing. It's also tied extremely closely with the AML, anti-money laundering. The anti-money laundering laws are not a joke here in Mexico. They are, the laws just changed in January, and that's why we're being audited so closely, because they're looking at the AML practices due to the new treaty that was just signed between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And so having that is going to be a great thing for all three countries, but it also opens some of the border to anti-money laundering. Do you know the number one place where anti-money laundering starts? Anybody care to take a guess? Why are we here tonight? We're talking about real estate, right? That's the number one place where anti-money laundering starts. It's not with the drug trade, it's not with anything else, it starts with real estate, because it's so easy to come down here and pay literally millions of dollars for commercial real estate, hundreds of thousands for personal real estate, and that's how people launder money. So that's why all of us, not just us as a company, but all of us are watched very closely. That's the laws in Mexico, which are not necessarily bad. Oops. The other thing is the ability to repay, we talked about already. Credit history, we look at your track record. We find out, do you pay your bills on time? If you don't pay your bills on time, why? It's not bad that you don't pay your bills on time. Do you know that most wealthy people in the United States, you know what their credit score is? Now, the credit score goes anywhere from the mid-400s up to, Steve, any guess?
Mid-800.
Who said 850?
850.
850. Do you know what the average people or millionaires' credit score is in the United States? Take a guess.
720.
720. That would be absolutely wonderful.
450.
Who said 400? It's not quite that low, but it's about 460. Okay? You know why? Because people, a lot of rich people don't pay their own bills. So is it fair to say, you know, I talked to a guy the other day. No lie, this is a true statement. I looked at the bank statements. He had $600 million in the bank. Wanted to buy a $9.5 million house for his daughter, but he wanted her to pay the cost of it. He gave her $3 million allowance per year. She wanted, look at some of you roll your eyes. That was so classic. You guys are so good. You should be giving your kids money like that. But the bottom line is that we looked at it, and guess what? Because of all of these factors put together, I had to turn to him and tell him, very famous guy, and tell him, you don't qualify. $600 million in the bank. That's how picky we are in terms of making sure we do the right things and how we do it. I know that sounds kind of foolish, but it's not. We treat everybody exactly the same way, okay? Job history, we look at, do you have a job? Some people say, you know, I've got a lot of money. I haven't worked for 20 years. And I'm like, wow, that's so wonderful. Decline, you know, because what happens if they can't pay the bill? Okay? Now, the other thing is business qualifications. A lot of people in Mexico, in fact, some of you in this room, may have put the name of your house in an LLC or an S Corp or something like that. And so we look at the business qualifications to qualify for something like that as well. You'll get, and I'll send a copy of this slide to anybody, so I won't go through all the little things in here, but one thing that we did when we came to Mexico is I just figured that if we were going to open up a business like this and do financing, that we needed to do everything from A to Z. So we have our own in-house closing. We have our own attorneys. We've got literally 40 years of experience just with closing. We just closed a loan. The fastest one we've ever closed was 41 days. The one that was the longest was a little over a year. Okay, I'd love to tell you the story about that, but it makes me cry. So But we average, and you've heard it said tonight, 60 to 90 days. We average that 60 to 90 day timeline. But the nice thing is, one thing that we do that a lot of other companies don't do is we educate you on the entire process. We sit down, we don't just talk about lending money, we don't talk about loans, we don't talk about finance, we don't talk about your home. We talk about what it takes. We talk about the things that scare you in Mexico. We talk about the things that you're feeling uncomfortable about in Mexico. We try to educate you on every little thing. A lot was said about the fideicomiso tonight. Fideicomiso is extremely important. You know, I look at the fideicomiso as an ironclad contract that gives you more strengths in home buying and home ownership in Mexico than you've ever had before. One of the things that people say when they come down here, first-time home buyer, they say, well, you know, I buy a home in Mexico, I really want to, and they're just ready to pull the trigger to say, yes, I want to buy it. And they say, yeah, but I just know the government's going to come in and steal it away from me. That doesn't happen anymore. That's because you've got the fideicomiso, you've got other laws that without people like our attorney friend that was here tonight that talked so much about, you know, literally the most important things, you know, capital gains, fideicomisos, things like that. You know, those are great things to understand and great things to know, because not only will it save you a lot of money in the long run, it's also going to save you from losing a lot of sleep, okay? Extremely important that you listen and you become educated on every part of the real estate process in Mexico. Why do I say that? Because most of you, or some of you, already own homes. Some of you are thinking about purchasing homes. Some of you are just real estate agents in here, not just, but that's important. But the key factor is that each one of you, in your own way, need to understand everything there is to know about this process so that you feel safe, you feel secure, and the bottom line is you put yourself in a position to make more money down here through investment than you've ever made before. Okay? That's extremely important. Somebody asked about the repayment schedule. Again, it's you're going to pay this just like you're going to pay everything else. You got a monthly payment. It's a 15-year fixed rate, amortized over 15 years, and no prepayment penalties. It's just that easy. If you pay your credit card bill every month, you're going to pay this every month. It's just like a mortgage you're going to see in the U.S. or Canada or anywhere else. The most important thing is, however, in Mexico, some people don't realize, and if you look at your fideicomisos, you look at your contracts, that if you have seller financing, if you have any financing at all, in Mexico, do you know if I do a loan for somebody at 7.5% interest, they mix 2 payments in a row, guess what I can do? I can up their interest rate. It doesn't go up much, only to 32%. Okay? Do you realize that? Have any of you read your contract? Now people start to squirm and they feel uncomfortable and they say, I don't like this guy. Because the bottom line is that if you don't know, and let's say you go on a 3-month trip somewhere and that bill doesn't get paid, then they have the right to come in and do that. Now, back in 2008, 2009, when you could get a loan or actually 2007 and 2008, when you can get a loan in Mexico with no problem, pay 3.5% interest, 30-year fixed rate, great loan, just like you could get in the U.S. and Canada at that time, and then all of a sudden the market crashed. Not only did rates start going up, but in Mexico, guess what happened? Any guesses?
The
What's that?
exchange rate.
What?
The exchange rate.
The exchange rate, the exchange rate, went from, 7, 8 to now, what are we at today? 19, 18, 19? The interest rate increased, it did. But guess what? What's that?
Banks got stuck with the...
Banks started losing money, not by the hundreds of thousands, but by the millions. So what did banks do? They stopped loaning. And so right now, you will not find a U.S.-type loan in any of the banks in Mexico. They won't do it. Okay? You can find a peso loan, but you have to qualify for that. And I would venture to say that there's probably maybe 5 people in this room that would qualify for a peso loan. I could be wrong. It may be a little bit higher, maybe 6. But there's not many, okay? It's a very difficult thing. So one thing that we do is we make sure that we're not like that. If somebody misses a payment, we're going to pick up the phone, we're going to call them. Somebody in my office is going to pick up the phone and say, hey, you missed your payment. Is there a problem that we need to know about so we don't fall into this trap? You know, and we've had one now, and the lady said, oh, you know what, my husband passed away, and he did all the bills, and so now I'm just trying to get my hands around this. So what did we do? We said, okay, look, we'll add those payments to the end, don't pay them, get everything worked out, let us help you, and then that's what we did. And so that's what we try to do. Our job is not to foreclose. This will shock a lot of people, but I was the president and CEO of the #1 foreclosure company in all of the United States. We did 3,900 foreclosures per month. Per month. That was in the low time. We did about 3,600 to 3,900 per week in the high times. That's what happened to the industry. And the foreclosures were terrible. So one thing that we started to do is we started to look at loss mitigation. And so loss mitigation means we would call you up and we'd say, you know, why haven't you paid your payment? You've had your house for 25 years and, you know, you've only got another 5 years to pay on it. Why didn't you make your payment? I can't, I lost my job, I did this. So what do? We would renegotiate your loan with you, take a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9% interest down to 1 or 2%, forgive some of the loan, and put you in a position where you could pay it. That makes me a really nice guy, huh? Unfortunately, we would still have to foreclose on some people because they just didn't have it. And so that was a tough situation to be in. That's not the type of guy I am. One of the reasons some of the banks stopped doing business in Mexico is the fact that the Mexican government, the finance minister's office, went to him and said, why are you foreclosing on all of these people? This is not something we want to do. We don't want to foreclose because it leaves empty buildings. It leaves things that does not make our environment look good. Am I messing up your camera? No, it's all over the place. I did that on purpose. So so we try not to put ourselves in a position where we ever have to foreclose. We haven't done that, and we plan on not doing it. We'll try to help people out before we'll foreclose on a unit. Okay. So, but it is important to pay your bills. What happens if you default? Okay, 4 quick things. First and foremost, we work directly with the borrower, just like I told you. We make sure that we put them in a position where they can be successful even when it's difficult. We understand that there's surgeries, there's medical issues, there's death in families, there's a number of different things. We understand that, and we try to take that into account at all times. And so our job is not to foreclose. Our job is to let you continue living your dream while the nightmare happens. Okay? Second thing is we provide options. We adhere to the laws both in the United States and Mexico. The one thing about the laws in the United States is you can foreclose on somebody pretty quickly in the United States. Okay? You can foreclose on somebody in Mexico even quicker. You know that you can issue a writ of foreclosure after 31 days in Mexico if you want to. That's not a good thing to do, but for sure at 60 days they're looking for you to issue a writ of foreclosure. And in some cases, depending on what the scenario is, you can go through a foreclosure in less than 90 days. Even though sometimes it'll take longer, but you can go. You had a question?
Sorry, yeah. Who holds the Who holds the trust?
Yeah, so we do. Yeah, that's a great question. Who holds the trust? This was a question we had in the back. We deal with the top 2 in Mexico. We deal with Phelps and we deal with Monex. Predominantly, we deal with Monex. So we make sure that we deal with the top people that are approved by the Mexican national government to make sure that we've got, we're not going to be in a situation where they just say, I'm not going to do this anymore, go find a new trustee. Because it's hard. And we won't get into talking about things like a warranty trust and stuff like that, but the trustee has a right to just up and say, you got 30 days to go find a new trustee, and that's a hard thing to do. So we always have a backup, but we try to keep the highest level of trustees kind of in our on our side, so that we make sure that we don't have that problem. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Scott.
Are yearly expenditures for the house, like HOAs, taxes, are all those rolled into the amortized payment every month?
They're not rolled into the amortized payment, no. But one thing that we do is we'll make all those payments for our borrowers. So they come down here, and 80-90% of the people that buy a home, they'll stay in it sometime during the year, and then they'll use Airbnb or one of the other avenues to rent the house out and use it as an investment. What we do every year is we'll pay the taxes, we'll pay the HOA, we'll pay, if you want us to pay your utilities, we'll pay your utilities. We don't charge any extra for that. That's all included in the price of doing work with Global. Why do we do that? People say, well, that's ridiculous. You're giving away money. You're right, we are giving away money. But who's your partner in investing in this house? Global Mortgage. We're your partner. In fact, in some cases, we own more of the house than you do. And so it behooves us to make sure that, we pay all the taxes in January. Why do we do that? Because we get a 20% discount. 20% of $300 or $400 or $500 is not a lot of money until you start looking at all these loans that you're saving this money on. And so we pass it on to the borrower. That helps them pay for hazard insurance, or helps pay for a month of HOA or whatever. So any money saved is a good thing. Okay? Yes?
What's max loan to value ratio?
Max loan to value, we will loan up to 60% of the property. Okay? We just found below that, people aren't looking below that. And if they do look below that, we're finding a lot of people aren't qualifying. Or they probably shouldn't be looking at a second home because they don't have the income to do that. So we have to be very prudent as to how we do things. So, yes?
What's your origination fee?
Origination fee right now is 3 points, but twist my arm and we'll negotiate that with you. Okay? But all of our other fees, and we do have other fees. We have an underwriting fee and we have a closing fee. The closing fee, if you look at most of the closers in town, is it something I said? So, can we buy you an extra drink if you stay?
They're cash buyers.
Okay, then leave. Okay. But all our other fees, like if you look at most closing agencies, and there's some really good closing agencies, we look at this and it could be anywhere between $2,000 and $2,500. Our closing fee is $1,250. So we try to keep the price down because it's a shock anyway to buy that property the first year. We try to keep the price down, but we are a for-profit organization. We're not a non-profit organization down here. We're offering a service that we feel is extremely valuable. Okay?
Do you require title insurance, excuse me?
We do require title insurance the first year. We do a title search. We do everything that tries to make your property completely safe. I could tell you stories, and we don't have the time, but I could tell you stories about title insurance that would literally, you'd say, man, why would I ever do without this?
One last question. Global financing, do you offer any kind of term deposits for people that have money that want to invest to support their mortgages?
Say that again.
So if do you offer any kind of return for people who want to invest in your company to support their mortgages? $500,000, but they're taking a $900,000 mortgage. Do you offer anything in the price?
Yeah, we don't at this point. No, because our investors are very large investors. They're Wall Street investors. Just to throw out a couple of names, and I'm not name dropping here, but the Carnegie Group. We have a group out of the largest. What's that?
You have lots of money.
They have lots of money. But we have a number of different groups. We are too deep in everything. So if one fails, then we're there to pick up the second one. We built this organization, and you know what, this is the last thing I'll say because I know we're running out of time, but we built this organization so that it'll last. We're not here to be one of those, let's make a bunch of money and then let's go. The people that are investing in Mexico are now coming down, and I talked to them the other day and they said, hey, can I invest in commercial real estate? Hey, can I invest in some of these people, these developers that are building these big units? Can I start investing in that? We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah, so what they're trying to do, because, and a lot of it's because this treaty that came about. There's a lot of money, I mean billions and billions, and some people say even trillions of dollars that are going to be, transversing through all of the different borders.
We're Canadian, so does it mean that the laws?
Say that again?
I said we're Canadian, so does that adhere to the laws of both the United States and Mexico?
Absolutely it does. What's it? Yeah. We adhere to the laws. Any place that we'll do business, like with Canada, right now we're just finishing up trying to get our license through Canada. We don't have to do a license. We could be a hard money lender and just loan you money and charge you 15, 16, 17% interest.
Right.
But we don't do that. We want to get licensed, we want to do it the right way, so therefore we have to adhere to the laws in all three places. We don't have to, but we do.
So when do you get the Canadian?
Hopefully within 90 days, 60 to 90 days. Okay?
Right.
So the future, you can't see that up there, but our future is strong. We're branching out into all over Mexico. We're bringing this to every area of Mexico that we can that's safe. There's some areas that we're not going to lend in, you know, but most of the areas, you know, the Lake Chapala areas that have been talked about tonight, we're actually going to be there. We're opening up an office in Tijuana. So we'll cover all the wine district, we'll cover, you know, literally Rosarito Beach, we'll cover everything. But that's how important we think Mexico is growing. So stand by, hold tight, don't sell your property yet if you can avoid it, because 2 to 3 years from now, you're going to be sitting on a gold mine. Thank you very much. Any other